Welcome to the Go One More Step podcast. I'm Brian White. I'm a veteran, I'm a survivor of my brother's suicide, and I'm talking to people about overcoming challenges of all kinds.
So welcome and happy July 2nd is when we're recording. It'll be a different date when people see this live. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Brian. How are you?
Really great. Thank you for taking the time. For those watching, we're with my friend Vanessa, whom I met through some separate work pursuits. And I know Vanessa as an actor, but you are so much more and have so much more to discuss, I think, and particularly in direct reference to the topic of resilience that we're exploring here. So if we could, I'd like to just ask, when I reached out to you and said, hey, I'm talking about resilience and I'd love to have you on the podcast, and let's talk about things that maybe you have worked through. My thinking was the struggle of trying to find work as an actor. And I had a couple of other secondary thoughts of that. I know, for example, spoiler alert, that for a time you were a single parent, which is always a test of resilience. But I didn't really know much beyond that. What leapt to your mind as the key topic of resilience for you?
Well, to be perfectly frank with you, Brian, for a moment, I kind of had a surge of that imposter syndrome that everyone talks about, because knowing some about you and your background with various armed forces, is it okay to say that? And knowing that you have a community of people who have, fought actual fights and had to overcome the sometimes physical and often emotional wounds that come with that, I thought to myself, well, I I have nothing to say about resilience, next to those who have gone through a struggle like that. So, gosh, thanks, Brian, for thinking of me, but I can't really say much in this topic. But the more we got to talking, the more I was able to overcome that imposter syndrome a little bit and realize that everyone, has a story of some difficulties. Many are probably living one right now, in the moment you see them. And that if I could share a couple anecdotes to shed some light on that, I'd be happy and honored to be considered. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for the leap of faith in overcoming that initial imposter syndrome. Because as we discussed kind of offline, yes, I'm a veteran, and yes, I'm part of a community of veterans, and that's when you talk about trauma and post-traumatic stress and things like that, the mind goes, and I almost said naturally, the mind goes because that is what gets the news to veterans, first responders, medical people who have been dealing with like major world events, combat, COVID, ER and ICU staff, that kind of thing. The reality of it, though, is everybody struggles, everybody fights, everybody has difficulties to overcome. The difference is type, and very often the difference is not scale, it's type. Where veterans are dealing with post-traumatic stress based on war experiences, I know a lot of women who are dealing with post-traumatic stress based on relationship events, which
Yes.
are in many ways which are in many ways exactly as or more violent, sadly, than what veterans and first responders and all that are dealing with. So the idea that because you never wore a uniform, you don't have a resilient story, I think is patently wrong. And I'm just overjoyed to be able to find as many different people with as many different stories to tell as we can, because what I'm finding is the common thread is we're all dealing with stuff and we all have things to fight through. And what I'm also finding is the ways we're getting through it are all starting to sound remarkably similar. And that to me is key. So thank you for being willing to share and getting over that.
Well, I'm just glad to do so. And I'm kind of nodding along when you talk about different experiences that you've heard from people. I would assume male, female, and kind of everywhere in between, because that's not binary anymore about, relationships or personal experiences that have been traumatizing. And it is very sad and scary. But again, being willing to say, we see you and we know that happened, and we want you to feel like you can talk about that. That I personally think that does a lot to go towards healing.
So you're seen. You're about to be heard. Tell your tale.
Oh gosh. Boy, this is almost a where do you want to start?
Right.
I I think what you alluded to earlier might be something we could talk about, the experience of kind of bouncing into the position of, and then maybe even moving forward as a single parent. To very briefly give a backstory, I was not always, and I don't consider myself one now, but when my former spouse and I separated a number of years ago, and my child at the time was not even a preteen, inching up towards those ages, I personally thought, this is going to be the best for everyone. This is what I want. This is what my, now ex-spouse wants. Yes, it's going to be somewhat challenging on the kid, moving back and forth between different places, but I don't think I realized how challenging it would be, so much so that, I think in many ways I seemed like the villain in this story, because I was, okay, I'm moving out and I'm getting my own place and I'm living my life and I'm going to be your parent. But, I didn't seem heartbroken. I didn't seem broken up. And I think that made things very challenging for my kid, who she tried to parent trap us once. It was honestly kind of, it's funny after the fact, but oh, well, you come to this thing and dad will come to this thing. And we kind of caught her and called her out on it. But I think as she started to forward her story of the child of two different parents, she saw one parent just gleefully going about their life and moving into a new pattern and way of being. And I think that caused her some hurt. And I think that may have caused a rift in that relationship. And then for a while, kind of the only thing she could do was retreat to her other parent, because, oh, that's the parent who seems to be hurt and wounded and going through the same things I am. And, I was trying to put on a brave face, but I was also, I was in a better place for myself at the time. So that struggle to realize that as I was moving forward in my life, that I had somehow distanced myself from my child, who felt that the only person who did see and hear her hurt was her dad, which got her to be very, very close to him, and almost to, now I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so this is armchair psychology at best, but I truly think she felt that, she had to rewrite the story in which I was the villain, and having nothing to do with me would be the only way she could, survive. So that was very hard. There were a number of years where, when I would come to pick my kid up at her dad's house, she would refuse to go with me, or, name calling, all kinds of, physically running away, my kid throwing up physical obstacles to keep me from taking her, home with me for the week, was a constant challenge. And, to feel like you have failed as a parent, to feel like this little human you brought into the world, and you're like, I swear to love you and protect you and do everything I can to be the best parent and to set a good example for you and encourage you to follow your own path. All of that was just melting. It was blowing up in front of me. And, I'm trying to put on this brave facade. So, finally, and after struggles and protests and screams and name calling, getting her into the car, getting her home, trying to make the time that we spend together as good or more fulfilling as the time she spent with her other parent. But it was an uphill battle, and her other parent very quickly kind of found someone else, and that person had their own child. And I think that reinforced for my kid the narrative that, like, my real family is over here. She said to me on more than one occasion, we're not a family. And I said, of course we are. I'm your mom and you're my kid. And, that's the best thing I can do is be your mom. And she said, no, families don't have two people. Families have at least three or more. And,
Oh,
the scene from Temple of Doom,
yeah, with the heart
of the
torn out
chest.
and held in front of you. Yeah.
And
Oh,
I want to make it very clear, I am in no way, shape, or form blaming my child, who at this point was, I think, maybe a preteen, saying this, much, much younger. And certainly, I don't think most of this it was said to hurt. I think most of this was said from a place of her own hurt and anger and confusion and seeing things in the binary. We've all learned and grown a lot, I think, her, me, and society as a whole these past few years. Oh, okay, not everything is on a binary, is it? So I digressed a little from that, Brian. I'll take it back just to say that was very much something to overcome, the fact that I had become the villain in this narrative that, again, I think my kid had to create, to make sense of the world. And I understand that, but also to realize that there was a refusal to see me as the mother because there wasn't, a father and another kid. And boy, at times that drove me to some kind of out there thoughts of, do I need to try to find someone right away, especially someone else who's another divorced parent with a kid? And will she accept me if I if I find those people and and enter into a relationship with someone else who also has a kid? And of course, I didn't follow through on that. But these are the late night thoughts that I had, especially if it was the time when she was with me and she'd gone to bed after basically saying this isn't a real family.
right.
Or when it was the time that she was with her dad, and I thought, well, what can I do before the next week with her to make her realize I really am her mom? So there's a roundabout first wave of dealing with something challenging, because I will say this: parenting is not an easy task for anyone. Even people who have two parents who are doing this together, or if there's been divorces and remarriage, if there's multiple parents, or if it's a very non-traditional family structure, doesn't matter how many parental figures there are, parenting's not necessarily easy. You're trying to speak the language of and understand someone in a different generation who has different day-to-day experiences and technological realities that we can't relate to at that age, and friendship concepts that are different from what we've ever seen before. So I will say this: parenting is never easy. Parenting solo is not easy, and I have nothing but respect for the people who choose to and do parent solo by themselves for the entirety of their child's upbringing. Those people deserve medals, and we should be handing them out. But I will say this: it was challenging to go from, oh, okay, there are two parents, and even if we don't agree on everything, there's two of us at least having a conversation, to, oh, there's me and how I would do things and parent, and here's this other person who is choosing to do things their way. And even when you try to co-parent with someone after a separation and a divorce, they don't have to do things the way you want, and vice versa. And then you start to introduce other people into the mix, and my daughter's other parent had introduced someone else into the mix before too long. And then you have a third set of opinions. And if those other two people say, hey, we're going to do things our way and you do things your way, well, okay.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of a first big step in. I'm going to figure
out. And
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. And with that big first chunk, which is a lot, and it was, and I really kind of want to emphasize and call attention to this. You just summarized what I'm guessing is a decade plus.
Not quite a decade, but let's see. The separation started when my, child was 9 at the time, and she is now the age where she is an adult. So a full decade has passed, but that's the first few. I guess that was the first few years there that I was kind of summarizing.
A few years of going through this, and even when it's not acute and in your face, it's there. So a few years of this. What mechanisms did you find, create, discover, invent to get through the really tough times, the mostly tough times, and the things are going well, but there's still this irritant, like time?
Well, some were healthier than others.
Yeah.
Watching
everything tends to be a mix.
Yes, watching everything on Hulu or Netflix and going through an entire bottle of wine was a less healthy version. And, there was the occasional weekend that happened. But, honestly, I will say this to you and to those who are watching, there were times where just crying and giving into those emotions and having that catharsis was what I could do. And I should clarify that there were two faces here. I had to put on the face of, right, I'm your mom and I love you and everything's fine, whenever my, preteen, then teenage daughter was with me and, and was less than thrilled about, our relationship or me as a parent. And I should clarify, Brian, you're right. This whole thing probably went on for something like 7-8 years, but I think originally I was talking to you about just kind of those first few years in that transition. So I'm putting on the brave face when she is with me, and then when she's not, it's like I'm losing it, because we generally did roughly, a week on and a week off, a week with one parent, a week with the other parent. So yeah, kind of taking a whole week of, I've been told I'm parenting wrong, and I'm clearly not reaching my kid despite what I'm trying, and everything seems to be going wrong. And am I even a good mother? And am I even a good person? You drop your kid off after a week of that, and sometimes you do just, sometimes you do just cry or kind of sit there stunned because you don't know what else to do.
Right.
But that's that's sometimes. There were times where I would just say to myself, I need to get out of the house. I need to be in an environment with fun, caring, interesting people. So I kind of tried to keep myself busy as much as possible. I started hosting pub trivia, and I would do that, a night or two a week, especially on the nights that she wasn't with me. Usually we had things lined up where it was like, oh, if I'm always hosting on, let's say, a Wednesday, the handoff is such that, she's with me for almost every day, but Wednesday we would do like 5 days on, 2 days off, 2 days on, 5 days off. It's logistics aren't important, but like being able to go somewhere and, be around a group of people who, okay, we're all here to learn. We're all just giant happy nerds. And I mean that in the most loving way. And, here we are sitting in a restaurant for 2 hours, asking questions and getting answers and, playing cheesy songs that everybody likes to sing along to. So that was fun for me to go out and go to a place where I could share what I love doing, which is, I guess I could call it performing. There's a performative aspect of hosting pub trivia. You tell jokes, you banter with the crowd, you give them information, and when they tell you you're wrong, you go, hey, I just read the questions, I didn't write them. So that was a lot of fun. And I also tried to do more with acting and theater, and that is how we met, is that I was doing some kind of what they call role playing acting, like, hey, this group that's training needs you to come in and pretend to be a patient who's sick and they have to deal with that, or someone who's in crisis that they have to assist, that kind of thing. So again, thinking logistically and carefully, because there's a schedule of, I have a kid half the time and I'm working full time, how can I do that? But I looked for opportunities like the one where we met. And sometimes evenings and weekend without my kid, I would do a short play or a reading or a mini film or something that just engaged me creatively, because acting and theater and really all the aspects of it, directing, choreography, that's always been a kind of a love of mine, something that I enjoy doing and get a lot from. And I've never fully made it a career. It's very difficult to, but it's always been something that's like, I will do that in my spare time. And, if it can be kind of a side job, great. Boy, if people are willing to pay me, terrific. But I've also volunteered my time for projects I love or that are meaningful to me. So doing that, so spending time when I didn't have my daughter with me and I could, take time off of work or have a weekend or an evening free, and doing more of these acting and directing and, local theater and film and role play gigs. I just met so many kind-hearted people, and, some who were willing to share their own stories of difficulties with parenting or difficulties with, how their relationship with their child developed post-divorce, and helping their child see that there were no villains in the story. There are just two people who are going different ways, and that happens sometimes. So that was super helpful. There's one wonderful woman I met who she and I were doing a one act play together not long after my ex and I separated, and my daughter first kind of started going, well, hey, you should have done everything differently, Mom. And this wonderful woman, she had a daughter who was about my daughter's age, and we would get them together and they got to be kind of friendly, and I just got support and encouragement from this other person who years later actually had a very amicable and very very peaceful separation and divorce of her own, but is in a position where the kids understood, and the kids were right with her, like, okay, we get it. So it's just, I could tell you 100 stories of like wonderful and encouraging people. I had a moment where I was helping with the costumes for one show, and I think I had received something that was a less than thoughtful message, having to do with, the tension kind of on that side from, what my daughter wanted and what her other parent wanted. And I had just kind of received that text real quickly while trying to work on the costumes for the show. And I was just kind of startled momentarily, and I was like, hold it together. And this one lady came up and just gave me a big hug and said something along the lines of, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you. And I'm going to lose it. I'm sorry. I'm going to lose it because this was just a wonderful, wonderful and amazing individual. And she could not have known in that moment just how much I needed that encouragement and that hug. And this particular lady is whom I just mentioned. She's no longer with us, but I'll tell you, Brian, when I was at her funeral a few years ago, I don't know if you've ever seen the funeral of a regular civilian, not a famous person, so packed that, there's standing room only and people are out the back of the building. And that's how I would want to live my life, as somebody who, at the memorial, it's standing room only. And I think that brief anecdote I told you about her just hugging me when she saw that something had happened and I was shaken by it, that's a testament to who she was and what she did every day. And that's a lot of what I found when I was very careful and cognizant about getting back into doing, theater and acting and, local performance opportunities, because that had always been, an area where I found people.
Yeah, the power of community and connection is impossible to overstate. And I your story really strikes me, because I think all of us in our lives, regardless of what the precipitating event was, have a memory where we were having a rough time, a rough day, a rough week, a rough moment, and somebody just acknowledged it, or somebody just made contact otherwise, and that flipped the day on its switch. And when we're going through something, it can feel so isolating, and it can feel like we're the only one in the world who's ever experienced this or ever will experience this, because it is very unique and it's very individual. But knowing that other people have, are, and will gone through something very, very similar and persevered and made it through can be extremely empowering too. So what you did in finding and building that community, and then whether by accident, design, or subliminal efforts, it sounds like you found a lot of people who could speak to what you were going through and could support you in that very specific, very individual, but shared path.
I think that's fair to say. I will say I tried to kind of leave, leave that at the door, because we want to walk into these spaces where we're, putting on a play or trying to shoot a film or, doing even an acting workshop. We want to walk into them without kind of going, oh, the day I've had, grumble. But and that was some of why I think I wanted to walk into there. This is something that's interesting, and it can be an artistic and creative and fun outlet. But as I got to know the people there more, and as we felt comfortable kind of sharing stories with one another, I realized there were plenty of other people who were there because, yes, like me, they wanted the artistic and creative outlet, but they were also kind of looking for a community and maybe something to give them meaning outside of whatever difficulties they were going through.
Sure. And at its simplest, if you go to a theater group, you're looking to connect with other people who are interested in something, the same thing that you are, and that's theater, and that's performing and telling stories.
Right.
You're searching for community, and that's what we do as humans, is we search for community. And we build so many micro communities around ourselves, whether that be a family of two, a family of three, the local theater group, your sports team, if you play after hours, softball or disc golf or whatever it may be. We build all these micro communities, and we start to give some of them the power of definition of self. And the loss of that can be really shattering, where you're not leaving or being ousted from a community. A part of you is being taken away, and that is fundamentally damaging and really harmful. And the closer and tighter and the more important and the more central to your definition of self that is, the more damaging that can be. So I think that and I've advocated for it. Find a tribe, find your interest, pursue that interest, find like-minded people, because that's what we need as human beings. But also you have to understand that carries a double-edged blade, because the loss of that, if you really begin to associate that with your definition of self, can be very hurtful. But that I mean, that's not to say don't do it, because we've just heard how incredibly powerful and important it can be when you find it and when you build it. And you get those micro connections, those small moments of shared humanity that really, like, that hug can get you through 10 minutes, which can get you through a day, which can get you through that week, which can, and it carries on. And I've said it in shorter videos. If you see somebody that looks like they can use a hey, keep going, and a fist bump, oh God, give it.
Please give it to
yeah. Costs you nothing. And it can, and I'm a little bit of a nerd. If you look at the Marvel timeline and the deviation from the timeline, you can take them off a very harmful timeline just by giving a hand on a shoulder, a fist bump, a hey, you got this, or hey man, you all right? A hug. Oh, dude, sorry to hear anything. Any little connection can put you on a different timeline, a different trajectory than the one the person is on. And it might not be that day, but you very well could, if you look at the really geeky timeline studies, you could save a life by saying, great job, by saying, how are you? By giving a hug. So that's, I'm incredibly sorry that you had to go through what you had to go through to get that hug. And I'm enormously sorry for your loss. And it sounds like a lot of people's loss with the passing of this great person. But that's such an important story with such a seemingly small moment that I'm very, very glad we got to hear it. Because it really shows how important those small things can be.
Well, it was 8 years ago now, I think. And it, feels like it happened last week.
Yeah. And you can see it, you can feel it through the screen. It's still a hugely powerful moment in your life. Yeah. Speaking about the sense of self and the definition of self, you've mentioned and alluded a couple of times, and we're going to take a short break, and I want to come right back to this. Okay. The questioning of value. You're not a good mom. And then late at night, as the wine bottle's almost empty in front of Hulu, am I? And that's something that we all go through in various ways and at various times, but I want to explore that a bit. But we got to break, reset everything, and then we'll come right back.
That's fair. Leave it on a heavy note there, Brian. Yeah. No, but
there will be more smiles in the second half, I promise.
I'm going to hold you to that because you said it.
Okay. Okay, welcome back.
Hello.
As promised.
Okay, smiles and some laughs and levity throughout.
Always. Okay. Always levity throughout. We were discussing before we took a quick break the idea of definition of self and how events can affect that and what effect that has on us. And you alluded a couple of times to having your value as a parent questioned. Did that carry over into other aspects
of parenting or of life?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Helpful. I think it's fair to say that, it did affect how I felt about myself as a parent. And I did probably more introspection than I would have already. I think may have even led to some second guessing here and there, should we do this extra fun activity because then I seem even more fun, or should I double, triple check myself before I dole out a consequence to really think about what the rationale was behind the inappropriate choice. So there was probably a little bit of second guessing there that I'm not sure actually helped anyone, because part of parenting is I need to know what I'm doing, and I need to be able to say and do things and communicate clearly with my child, and I do need to be able to admit when I was, wrong or made a mistake, but I think I was so caught up in, oh, how is this going to be reacted to, or what's going to be said about this? I think I was so nervous about kind of the scrutiny or how it would be received that I maybe wasn't as, true to myself intuitively as I should have been. But I think that probably did carry over into other facets of life. It's hard to feel great about yourself as a human if you're already doubting one of the most core things you do, which for me was, parent this person. So yes, that can spill over to, am I, you know, am I terrible at everything I do? Am I, not good at my job? Am I not good as a friend? Am I not good as a sibling, a daughter? And I will say one thing that did affect, and we've touched on this a little bit, but one thing that did affect was, potential romantic relationships, because I wanted to be very careful that I wasn't entering a relationship that didn't, have potential to go somewhere. Because, I have a kid.
Sure.
Yes. She's only with me half the time and grudgingly, but, thinking about who else could even be invited into that circle. And I think I'd made, a misstep, kind of thinking something was going to be long term and serious, and getting to know that person's family, and having my daughter get to know the family, and everybody feeling all connected, and then me realizing this isn't the person. And that, I think, was maybe even more so devastating for my child. And I think that was tough, because she'd started to feel like, oh, here's this other family that I have. Well, no, once that relationship ends, even though people can say they'll still be friends, that's not really the case. We're not going to go spend holidays with them. It's not like that anymore. So that was challenging. So I was very cautious about, is there even a potential, for a romantic relationship? And am I even, a good enough person? If I don't feel like I'm as good of a parent as I'd like to be, could I even potentially be someone's partner, significant other? And, what if there were to be future kids? Would I even be a good parent for that? I realize I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but
well, yeah, but that's the path the brain takes when we let it, is we take a minor thing and it just, I call it the monkey mind, and I stole that from a number of sources. Just picture a little monkey with a hammer running around your brain, hitting all of the exact receptors to make you question yourself and question the future. And then, like, you have discussions in your head before the actual discussion, and it goes exactly the wrong way, which is how we imagine it. And so all of this happens, and yeah, you fast forward 10 years and you're miserable and your child is not speaking to you, and people run screaming from the sight of you. You've become your inner ugliness has come out, and the trick is to short circuit that. Realize it for what it is, and break that mental cycle. And everybody has different ways. So my question to you is, what did you find to break that out?
Oh, I don't know if there was one aha moment. I think it was a series of builds. You hear the rare tale of there being an aha moment, but for me, it was a series of builds of realizing, I'll be open to finding something if and when it feels right to me. And then if and when that individual, would be introduced to my child, who by this point was older, in the teen years, then that's okay. We can take that as it comes. So I think I realized kind of what you're saying. We don't need to suddenly think 10 years ahead to the worst case scenario. And I'll tell you, Brian, this was a moment of, oh gosh, I don't know if it would be, I don't know if you would call it vulnerability or resilience or pure gall. I don't know. So we'd been talking about how, being involved in theater and acting and similar artistic pursuits was useful for me and was helping me find both a creative outlet and, some additional members of a community. I I was actually directing a play years ago, a short play, one act. It was part of a festival, and we had traveled for this festival maybe an hour or two away, and I was just so proud of the work I'd done. Well, let me be clear, the actors who were in it were great, and it was a good script, and I didn't have to do a whole lot as the director. Okay, you do this, great script, yeah, I'll make a few suggestions. But I was very proud of it, and I had a moment of thinking, yeah, I wouldn't mind being able to share this like with someone as a partner. And a friend of mine who was also there also had a show that was in the festival, basically said something she'd been threatening for ages. She said, I'm going to put your information up on one of those, online dating sites if you don't do it. But, she made this threat in a way where I thought, she is actually serious. And I don't really want to play that game because I don't know what she would say or do. So this was a week where my child was with her dad, and I kind of got home from this festival, and the wonderful actors I was working with and show that I directed, was in the top couple, and it had gotten some awards and was going to move on to the next series festival, which is great, yay. And got home, and my friend was texting me, and she was kind of like, you do this or else, and meant with love, I think, not threats. And so here it was, late at night, and I was basically Googling kind of like, how do you make one of those dating profile thingies? And I did. I spent, some time kind of going, okay, here's me, here are things I like, here's,
Right.
what I am and I'm not interested in. Okay, fine. And I did put it up on one of these sites, and texted this friend of mine, at this point it was probably midnight, to say, there, I did it, I'll bet nothing comes of it, what do you know? And signed off and went to
That'll
bed.
learn you.
Right. Kind of an I did it, but see, it's not going to amount to anything. And well, actually it did. I don't know if you want that story next, or if there's something else you'd like to hear.
Well, I mean, yeah, keep going, because just the mood of this is lifting.
Yeah, it is. It
And
is.
it's
Some
you're
levity.
about a turn that your path took that feels like now the path you're on, which feels much more positive. So yeah, let's continue in that direction, because really what I want to explore is what took you from this path that could have gone many destructive ways, whether that be self-destructive or externally. And now you have changed direction onto a path that is very positive and constructive for yourself and your family.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's the part that I want to explore and figure out how we got there, because that's the key, is how do you get through while making the change?
well, I think it was having the outlet of something that I loved, that brought me, some intellectual stimulation and some creative opportunities. And so getting this chance to direct this play and, take it on the road, as it were, even though the road was just an hour or two away. And I think the fact that I said, I'm not going to just let myself sit at home and be sad when I don't have my kid with me and think about, oh, I'm not a good enough parent. I'm going to go and do things that enrich me and challenge me, and hope that I set a good example for my kid, or that I can even share some of these finished products with my kid. And I did sometimes. Sometimes I, take her to see a show I worked on or was in or something. But I think it was that, having that outlet that inspired me, that made the path a little more positive. And I think it was, having a friend who, even though it's done through some threats and coercion, but mostly, I think, well-meaning threats and coercion, a friend who realized you're proud of the work you've done and you wouldn't mind having someone to share it with, for goodness sakes, why don't you at least try to put yourself out there? And so I did, feeling very silly and vulnerable and having never done that before. And this was, oh gosh, 6.5 years ago now. So an era in which I think many people were familiar with that world of online dating. And I knew next to nothing about it. So, my fears ranged from, someone's going to chop me up and put me in their freezer after we, meet at a local Panera. Don't sue us, Panera. That's the first restaurant that came to mind. Or,
We won't tag.
Right. Or, oh, somebody's going to be, weird and cagey, and it's going to turn out they have 3 different spouses in 3 different, states. And yeah, so I didn't have a lot of positive thoughts going into that, but I somewhat grudgingly did it because I was feeling like there was room in my life, for someone else. And I also felt like I wouldn't be asking someone else if I met someone and if it went anywhere. I didn't feel like I'd be asking them to take on so much, because at this point, my kid is a teenager and, kind of doing their own thing enough. I think it's different having someone come into your life when you have like a much younger kid who maybe needs more direct supervision and more, metaphorical handholding or physical handholding. So I did. I went on one of these sites and, put some information up and just kind of said, here's here are some things I like and don't. And, just tried to make some ridiculous jokes. And honestly, I don't even remember that much of it now because it's been 6.5 years. But literally the next day, I know this isn't how these things usually go, but the next day I got this very intriguing, very fun message from someone who kind of said, oh, I also like trivia. Did I tell you I'd once seen a Jeopardy taping? And, hey, we like a lot of the same shows. And have you done this in the area? Have you seen that? And I thought, what an interesting and intriguing person. So we ended up talking for a while and, and meeting and early on, I was like, look, I do have a kid. She is with me sometimes. She is not with me sometimes. She's not my biggest fan right now. I'm not asking anyone to do any sort of parenting. I'm just letting you know, like, that's the scenario. And this wonderful individual kind of said, oh, okay, cool. And was along for the ride. And, several months in, to me seeing this person, he said, yeah, what if just one of these weekends, we take her out for brunch or something. And, I get to kind of casually meet her and we can, we don't even have to be very,
Right.
we don't have to go into details necessarily about like, oh, this is a relationship, or, oh, we've been seeing each other for a few months. And I kind of said, I'm okay with that if you are, sort of a meet a friend.
Sure.
And teenagers are smart. So I think she saw right through that. But long story short, that continued. We'd spend time with her when she was with me, and we'd kind of go somewhere to a third party space. So it didn't necessarily feel like, oh, we're inviting you into our space or we're going over to your space. But eventually it kind of morphed into, okay, we'll be in your space or you'll come over to our space. And that was, fantastic. And, this individual went from kind of saying, oh, okay, well, I could see myself in almost the position of being like an uncle, like, I'm certainly not trying to step in as a parent, because this kid already has a dad. And I said, okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And, and my partner said, yeah, you're the parent and I would completely defer to you, but I'm here for support. And I thought, good answer. I'm a family feud. Good answer. Right. Yeah.
He was on advice columns. Good for him.
Yeah, exactly. But then I think as things progressed, I think my kid very much came to think of him as an additional parental figure, not to replace anyone. And that was certainly fine because, her dad had remarried, actually the person who was, around kind of early on. And so she had had this other parental type figure in her life for quite some time. And then when my, now husband and I got married, and this is the individual that I'm talking about from like day one on dating site. he
because
also
that
has,
happens all the times, even in movies.
I'm sure it does.
Later,
This particular site, which was Okay Cupid, hey, Okay Cupid, endorse us if you want. They're welcome to like give me a call and yeah, they're welcome to.
Not the sandwich place.
Sandwich place. Oh yeah, Panera's not calling us, but Okay Cupid might be like, hey, that's a good plug for our business. No, so eventually my, now spouse and I got married, but over the years leading up to that, I think he went from more of a, okay, I'm with someone who has a kid and I will just be here in the background for support as needed, to, okay, I'm with someone who has a kid and I'll step in as more of that like family member, like uncle or whatever, but not a parent. Eventually that really kind of moved to, okay, I'm here as another parent type. And that was gradual, and that was over, over the years. And I think we just kind of shifted as we felt the need, because there was a time it's like, yeah, this is what that has become. And it was really, really heartwarming for me to see that the two of them, my kid and my now spouse, seemed to respect and understand one another. Didn't always agree for sure, but there were messages that he could convey that I couldn't, and there were things she felt more comfortable broaching to him as a topic first, and then he kind of said like, okay, that's great, having talked about that, now what do you want to convey to your mom? Or okay, what needs to happen next? Maybe we chat with your mom about this. And that was really amazing. And I will say that I know self-worth comes from ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can't ask someone else to give us our self-worth. We have to build that and grow that and know that it's ours. Having said that, the fact that I met someone who was, kind and caring and supportive and very much willing to take on the sort of, oh, okay, you have this kid and this kid is of a certain age and this, you and this kid maybe have some strain in that relationship, but that's just part of your life.
A lot to step into.
Right. It's a lot to step into. And, and having someone who was there for that as it built and grew and progressed and got better, I think that helped a lot, because it made me feel like I was, it made me feel and know that I was a worthwhile parent. We all make mistakes, but it doesn't make us terrible parents. And it made me feel like I was, this is going to sound cheesy, Brian, but it made me feel like I was worthy of being loved, because
doesn't sound cheesy at all. No. Yeah. And if I can go back a little bit, I'd love to have an observation. I've heard a few stories now, not a ton, but a few. And yours, you actually said the word vulnerability. And a trend that I'm noticing is trajectories turning on points of vulnerability. When people are on darker paths and find the courage to be vulnerable, those seem to be pivot points in a lot of stories that I'm hearing. And so I'd like to take it back a little bit. And you mentioned your friend who all but coerced you into it, but that came on the heels of having worked on this one act play and gotten yourself into this community and found this community and put yourself back out. So, when you're going week on, week off, and on the on week, putting a brave face on and finding ways to make it look like you've got your stuff together. And then on the off week, Monday, and I'm just using random days, Monday and Tuesday, you collapse a little bit, you have a cathartic cry. Wednesday, you reset. Thursday, Friday, you bank up the resiliency. Saturday, the door opens and the mask goes on. Rinse, repeat. But that point where you put yourself out there into something frightening is where it turns.
Yeah.
Other than your friend coercing that, where do you think you found that courage? And I say courage very deliberately, because I know people who would happily run toward machine guns, but would not make a public speech. Like I know guys who have run toward machine guns, but if you ask them to make a best man speech at a wedding, then you will see fear. Like crippling fear. And everybody's point of vulnerability is a little bit different. It sounds like you found yours and got through it, which is where your story turns. Completely amateurish, and I'm neither psychologist nor psychiatrist, but just a kind of a common thread I'm noticing, and yours sounds very clear to me.
So talk a little bit more about that vulnerability leading up to saying, okay, I'm going to try this putting myself out there.
More so acknowledging that it made you feel vulnerable and doing it anyway, because that's the definition of courage, right? Is being scared as hell.
Doing what scares us.
Anyhow.
Yes.
So what reserve did you draw from there?
Gosh, that is a great question. I don't think I thought it through at the time. I think it was a combination of things. I think having felt a little bit alone, both personally and emotionally, okay, I have friends. Yes, I've found, some people in this, community around acting and theater and whatnot that have been friends and are there for me, but to go home alone on a night that I didn't have my kid with me and kind of say, it's quiet here. And yes, I'd like someone who either is sharing the space with me or who I can call and, have be the last person I talk to at night. I did have a desire for that. And I think I was feeling better about myself, that I wasn't just this failure as a parent or as a person. And I was proud, of the work I'd done, when things weren't easy. Some of it professionally, some of it in these, extra hobbies like directing this play or kind of these, side gigs, as you will. And I think there may also have been a little bit at the time of me kind of thinking to my friend, well, I'll show you, you don't know everything. And she was right. I take it back. Yeah. Sometimes we do things out of, out of a desire to prove a point, which I kind of did. So maybe I don't deserve credit for being as courageous as you think, but
I want to counter that, right? Because right up until we started talking about the defiance and showing your friend, and the I'll show you bit, you might have missed it. You were accomplishing things in the face of difficulty.
Yeah.
Which then empowered you to try slightly harder things. And then you would accomplish those in the face of difficulty. And you said the word proud because you had persevered, you had conquered, you had done things that were hard. And that, and I'm hitting that really hard, and I'm being very selfish about it, full disclosure, because that's sort of the core message I'm trying to get across.
Proves your point.
The bag on my back, talking like when something's a little bit hard and you do it anyway, it gives you a little bit more to do something that's a little bit harder. and then you get that done, and you keep building on these wins, and that gives you the courage to eventually do something that feels really vulnerable and frightening, and that opens the door to what sounds like a massive win. And it's just really, really cool to watch that progression and hear it through your lens and through your story.
Thank you.
No, thank you, because I can't, because I'm not a pro, I can't capture the words for how important this is for people to hear that this can happen. And for people to hear from not Navy SEALs or not veteran people of all walks of life need to hear people from their walk of life and every other walk of life telling a version of this tale, and as directly and as vulnerably as you just did. So thank you.
Wow. Okay. I mean, because it is no exaggeration, Brian, to say that there were nights I was, crying and alone and feeling like I was just a failure at everything in life. And to now be able to tell you that, it's years later, and technically she'd now be considered an adult age-wise, but my daughter and I are close, and she comes to me with some frequency, sometimes just to say hi or see how I'm doing. Sometimes she comes by to raid the fridge, but she calls up for advice. And, I would say we have a strong relationship and are there for one another. And it's everything I wanted. And yeah, most preteens and teenagers are not known for getting along perfectly with their parents. But, we have really gone 180 degrees in this, and people I know whom I haven't maybe spoken to as much for the past few years are just overwhelmed to kind of know, oh my gosh, that's gotten better. I think even you and I
mean, we've captured it in an hour, and just an astounding ride, and a growth path that is incredibly inspirational for both of you, and for this unnamed new spouse, and kudos to him.
Right. I'm protecting everybody's name here, but yeah. Just in case. But
yeah, and that's fine. But there are a lot of small moments in your story that I think are a lot larger, definitely larger than at the time you gave them credit for, and might still be a little bit larger than you're giving them credit for. And a lot of them came from inside of you, and a lot of them came from you finding the courage to take a shot. And small shots and small wins add up. They add up. And every time you take one and it hits, you take a bigger one, and you take a bigger swing, and you take a bigger swing. And then you put a profile on OkCupid.
Right. And people do that all the time, right? But
and somebody answers, and you're intrigued, and you're more intrigued than you are scared, and you take the chance.
That's what it was, because and I owe my spouse credit and courage for taking that first leap, because I didn't know right away. In fact, early on I kind of thought, yeah, this seems like a nice fun person, but who knows. I didn't really think it would go anywhere, but I could not imagine my life now without him. He's a partner in life, courage, silliness,
all equally important.
All equally important. Yeah, very much.
Thank you so much. This has been exactly as powerful as I thought it was going to be when we talked. I saw a lot that I thought was gonna hit. It hit much more viscerally, personally, than I expected it to.
Okay. Wait, for you or for me?
Yeah, definitely for me.
Okay.
Just what a message, what a path, what an incredible series of frightening shots you took, And I'm so incredibly glad you did, and even more glad that they resulted in what they have, and that you've got this new strong set of relationships, and that you're on this path the way it looks now.
Thank you for that, Brian. You've really, since the first day I met you, you've been a friend and a supporter and a champion for all people, which I greatly admire, and which is one reason I was willing to come on here and share all this very personal stuff with you and your community.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I am. I generally am a fan of people, and that's turned on a few pivot points of my own. So this is incredibly rewarding. I hope, I hope two things happen with this. I hope a lot of people who this story will resonate with see this and check out the other stories I've talked to people about. And I hope that the people who are looking for those stories see yours and take a chance and see just how similar we all are, and just we're all going through stuff, and what it takes is winning tiny, tiny, tiny battles, and occasionally settling up when you're scared as hell, and the rewards are there. Thanks so much, Vanessa. This has been an amazing talk.
Thank you, Brian. You too. I hope we'll chat again soon. Can you edit this so I don't say anything real dumb?
I'll do my best.
Thanks.
We'll talk soon. Bye.